If you have never had the experience of traveling the Black Belt in Alabama and Mississippi, it's something that everybody should do to get an awareness of how people live in a large portion of our country. If we can help them get out of poverty, if we can close that income gap, it will be an amazing thing for us as a society. So it is a lot of work, but it is very, very rewarding.
I do want to take this opportunity to welcome you all to our Learning Labs speaker series. We were just speaking with some of the panel today in terms of the evolution of Learning Labs. This began as a small lab conversation opportunity for folks within WGU Labs to bring in thought leaders and have a conversation around emerging themes, exciting projects, or sort of next steps in terms of topics related to EdTech, equity, or education in general. As we began to organize these conversations, we found that more and more people wanted to join. And so we took it upon ourselves to extend an invitation to a broader audience. And really, this is our way of just being able to re-energize ourselves by focusing and thinking and discussing about ideas that have the potential to have an impact. And Learning Labs, as we've called it, is where ideas come to play. We have been more than privileged in terms of some of the panelists who have joined us already and who have agreed to join us. Today is no exception, and we'll introduce our speaker today. But I did just want to take this opportunity to welcome you all to our Learning Labs speaker series, and we hope to have you join us on a regular basis. The way that we'll be spending our time today is really recognizing that the main value of this time that we have together is in being able to have an interaction. So we're going to spend a few minutes just introducing the speaker, talking about the schedule today. And then the presenter, our guest presenter today, will have a short presentation in terms of introducing us to some of her work, the inspiration that spawned that work, and the next steps in terms of where that work is headed. And then we'll open it up to 2 rounds of questions and answers. The first round, Nicole and I will ask some questions informed from past conversations we've had with Martha, Dr. Escobar, and the presentation that she's presented. And then we hope to open it up to you all to be able to ask questions directly of our presenter, to learn more about the project or have some of your questions answered by our expert guest today. So feel free to start populating your questions into the chat as those questions come to mind. We have on our team some folks who will capture those questions and bring them back up to the fore at the very end. With that, I'll pass it to my co-conspirator, Nicole Barbero, who will give us the pleasure of introducing our speaker today, and then we'll kick it off. So Nicole, please.
Thanks, Omid. Today, we're very excited to welcome our guest, Dr. Martha Escobar. Martha has a PhD in cognitive and behavioral science with specializations in statistics and behavioral neuroscience from the State University of New York. She is currently a professor of psychology at Oakland University in Michigan. Her research focuses on learning and memory mechanisms across different species, animal models of cognitive dysfunctions and their treatment, effects of environmental contaminations on prenatal development, and the effects of cancer treatment on cognition. She has received several mentoring and teaching awards and previously directed the Auburn University Psychology Teaching Training Program, which produced many nationally recognized instructors. I can also attest to her wonderful mentorship, as Martha was highly important and impactful mentor to myself when I was a graduate student at Oakland University as well. Her interest in mentoring has led her to being chief advisor for many student organizations and to focus part of her research efforts on issues of student development, retention, and success. She is currently a principal investigator on 6 NSF-funded projects at broadening participation of underrepresented ethnic, economic, and social minorities in STEM, and an active participant in various national initiatives to develop inclusive models for STEM education. These programs will be the focus of today's event. And with that, I'd like to welcome Dr. Martha Escobar. Martha, thank you for joining us all today.
Thank you very much for this invitation. I was told that I could keep it informal and very brief, so I'm going to give you a very, very brief overview of the type of work that we're doing. When I was asked for a title, I didn't really know what title to give this presentation. We always talk about a leaky pipeline in STEM, the idea that we continue to lose students as we progress through the STEM field education. And the reality is that we can do a lot about this leaky pipeline, and we shouldn't see it as a leaky pipeline as much as diversions from the pipeline. And that's what I want to talk to you about. So my plan for today's presentation is to start with the why we're doing this work, what we're doing, how we're doing it, and what we have learned from the work that we have done, and then open it up for questions and answers. When we talk about the leaky pipeline, it's an analogy for the fact that we can start with a pool of qualified students. And as we progress through educational levels, we seem to lose them. So this is part of a study that was published in 2008 and looked at the number of ninth graders that we had in 2001 and followed them through their academic development until 2011, 10 years later, to see how many of them graduated with STEM degrees. Despite the fact that we started with 4 million students, the number of students that became interested in pursuing a STEM profession continued to dwindle as they advanced through their academic careers. So only 32% of students were college ready, 7% of them decided to major in STEM, and by the time that we look at the number of graduates, is only about 4%. So why should we care about this? Well, think about what you guys do at labs, and think about the world right now. More people own a cell phone than a toothbrush. And that gives you an idea of the importance of technology and the importance of understanding technology, being able to create technology, and being able to be ready for the technological challenges of the future. So the question is, are we preparing our students for this challenge? Are we preparing our students for what is to come whenever they need to encounter themselves as the makers of technology? And the reality is that the United States is lagging behind, especially the Pacific Rim countries, when it comes to achievement in math and science. About 78% of high school students do not meet the benchmarks for math, science, and or English when they go into college. About half of the students says that they will like to pursue a career in science and engineering, but only about 18% of them actually try to do that, try to go to college or any sort of post-high school training in science and technology. So that creates a problem when it comes to potential and capacity to actually provide that sort of workforce that we need to have to be truly competitive in the technological world. When we look at the composition of the population in the US, obviously the US is a primarily white country, but individuals from white background make only about 60% of the population. However, when we look at the number of individuals in science and engineering occupations, we see that especially white men are overrepresented, Asian men are overrepresented. And when we look at ethnic minorities like Black and Hispanic individuals, they're severely underrepresented. And we're very interested in the experience of Black women because they are the most underrepresented group in all technological fields, with only about 2% of the technological workforce being made up of Black females. So when we think about equity, it's very difficult sometimes for people to understand what we mean by equity. So I have this little figure, I use it with my students, and I figure it was good to use here. Imagine that you want to go to a baseball game. So we have 3 people who want to go to a baseball game. And let's assume that all the seats are taken and they're told, yes, you can go and watch the game, but you have to watch the game behind a fence. So this fence is a barrier for them to actually be able to watch the game. Now we have 3 different individuals, so their experience watching the game behind a fence is going to be very, very, very different. One individual in this figure has a vantage point that the other 2 individuals do not have. So when we talk about equal opportunities for everybody, when we talk about equality in education, that means that we're giving everybody the same tools to try to reach the goals that we set for them when it comes to education. So if an individual starts from a vantage point, that individual will continue to have a vantage point, and the individual that starts from a disadvantage will continue to have the disadvantage. This problem is worse because the reality is that we have huge gaps when it comes to privilege in education and when it comes to advantages in education. So the best thing that we can do right now is to try to aim for equity. which means that we're going to be giving each individual the tools that they need to reach their potential regardless of where they start. This means that some individuals are going to need more support, some individuals are going to need less support, but we're going to take them to the same place. Now, the goal is not for us to be providing these equitable interventions. The goal will be for us to have no barriers to what people can achieve in education. So equity is just a step towards trying to get to that point where there are no barriers in education. So a lot of times I am asked, well, well, maybe people just don't want to do science. Why are we concerned with people that do not want to do science, and why do we want to push them into science? And the reason for that is that some segments of the population are underrepresented in STEM for reasons other than a lack of interest. Ethnic minorities are overrepresented at the lowest levels of socioeconomic status, and this is something that is going to affect education at all levels. People from low-income backgrounds are going to have low access to quality schools and quality pre- and after-school programs. Parental education is a huge predictor of child educational attainment. And just think about COVID right now. This morning, I was explaining to my daughter how to find the vertex of a parabola, which I don't think a lot of parents can do, especially in the areas in which we are providing our interventions. So parental resources to supplement education are going to be a huge, are going to have a huge impact on children's academic attainment. The social environment is also going to have an impact because individuals, especially from underrepresented backgrounds, are going to be facing stereotypes and lowered expectations. If my teacher does not think that I can achieve, why would I try to achieve? Individuals from low-income backgrounds tend to experience isolation, and their view of what a smart person can do may be very different from our view of what a smart person can do. If I go and ask some of my kids in very rural areas, what do smart people do? They're doctors and they're cops, and they work at the gas station. They don't tell me they go to school and get a degree in actuarial science, which is actually one of the highest paid careers right now. So their definition of what smart people do may be very, very conditioned by the environment in which they grew up. And of course, we're going to have a lack of role models in science. Minorities are highly underrepresented in academia, and scientists are depicted in the media in a way that is consistent with the majority, not the minority. And this affects curriculum development too, because most curricula in science and mathematics view minorities as historical anecdotes, not part of the history of science. One example that we always use is this gentleman. I'm gonna give you a second to look at him and see if you know who he is. And I'm gonna give you the name and see if you know who he is. If you eat peanut butter, you have George Washington Carver to thank for it. He was an individual that introduced the idea of crop rotations to peanut plantations in the South in the early 1900s. So he pretty much saved the agricultural economy from the South. Peanut plantations were going down. And what he discovered is that nitrogen is depleted by peanuts. So if you rotate crops with things that bind nitrogen to the ground, you're going to have better crops, which is something that we still do to today. He created a wagon that went from farm to farm, explaining to farmers how to scientifically do farming. He testified in front of Congress in the 1920s as a Black man. He was brought in as an expert to determine whether or not peanut farmers should have tariffs in their production. He was the second American to be inducted into the Royal Society of Arts in England, and he was an advisor to 4 American presidents. He was also an advisor to the Prince of Sweden. Today, the King of Sweden came to study under him, and a very, very close friend of Henry Ford. Actually, he's the first African-American to have had an executive action given to have a monument built in his place of birth. However, most of us do not know who George Washington Carver is. And so he's an anecdote in the history of science rather than a very important driver of how we do agriculture today. With all of this in mind, we have been working really hard to try to come up with a solution to this problem of equity. And I am not doing this work alone. I have an incredible number of partners, institutions of higher education. We have a whole bunch of 4-year schools in Alabama. We have community colleges. We have many school districts. The Alabama Department of Education has been partnering with us in many projects. The Black Belt Community Foundation and the Greater St. Mark Missionary Baptist Church are 2 community organizations with whom we work very closely. And we have been expanding to neighboring states within the Black Belt in the Southeast, specifically Mississippi and Tennessee. We are trying to expand to Louisiana, Georgia, and Florida in the upcoming couple of years. So most of our work is focused on the Black Belt, which is named because the soil is black, and in other otherwise clay soil. And that's where a lot of the plantations were in the Southeast. We're specifically focusing on Alabama. So the Black Belt is about 600 counties in 11 states. Alabama is about 17 counties with 19 school districts. And this is home to some of the poorest counties in the country. Of the 350 plus persistently poor counties in the country, 252 are housed in the Black Belt, with some of them in Alabama. When we think, for example, about Dallas County, which is where Selma is located, 60% of children live in poverty, 40% of families live in persistent poverty. About 40% of kids drop out of high school before completing their degree, and only 15% of individuals in this area pursue any sort of training or education after high school. So our focus has been the Black Belt because this is the place where we can have the greatest impact since we have the greatest deficit. And this is my representation of the pipeline, and each of those tags represents a program at a particular level in which I am personally involved in which we're trying to find solutions for the equity and representation issues that we encounter. So we have several programs at the K-16 level, and those are the ones in which I am going to focus my presentation, but we've also been working with individuals at the master's and doctoral level, and also in the transition from doctoral level to becoming faculty members in the STEM areas. So to start, I am going to talk very, very briefly about our K-12 programs and the reason for us to implement them and some of the things that we have found in those programs. I'm going to start with our Alabama Computer Science Education Program, which is funded by the Includes mechanism of the National Science Foundation. We are partnered here with multiple schools in Alabama, community organizations, multiple school districts, and we have received some support from Intel and Microsoft. Why did we want to develop this program? Well, computer science is an area in which we have a very, very large disparity between the need for qualified personnel and the production of qualified personnel. In 2014 in Alabama, there were over 4,000 computer science related jobs open, and only 460 students graduated with some sort of a computer science degree in the entire state. So you get to see the disparity there. And it's a workforce that has been populated mostly by individuals from foreign backgrounds, and we want to encourage individuals from national backgrounds to pursue that sorts of career. Alabama has been aware of this, and there are new computer science education standards for the state. This year, all high schools in Alabama must offer some sort of computer science education course. Next year, that order moves to middle schools, and in 2023, all elementary schools should also provide some sort of computer science education. So some of my collaborators have been very closely involved in the task force that has developed these standards and the development of the curriculum for these new standards. Our target are 8th graders, and the reason for that is they are going to go to high school and select courses for the first time. So we figured if we can give them an interest in computer science, they might continue to pursue that interest when they get to high school. So what we did is we developed a curriculum that aligns with the state standards, and it is offered at 3 schools in the state. We have been targeting the most rural schools in the state. The reason for that is some of our schools are single building schools. They have very low number of computers in which students can work. One of our schools does not have access to the internet for students. So we really have a great need for the development of programs in education in that area. For this program, we're using Microbits. If you're not familiar with Microbits, they are an open source hardware that was designed by the BBC for computer science education in children in the UK. And in the UK, Microbits are given free to students in the 7th grade. These are really, really cool devices. I have one there on the screen. They are fully programmable. They have 25 LED lights. They have 2 buttons. They have light sensors, temperature sensors, motion sensors. You can program them wirelessly, and you can connect them to a USB. And you can program them with Scratch, with Python or JavaScript. For 8th graders, we use Scratch. And they can do some really cool things. I don't have permission to post any pictures from our students, so these are some of the things that they can do with the Microbits. You know, we have like a soccer goal, so you can shoot a ball and the counter tells you how many times you have scored. Our students did the traffic light that is on the bottom right. They loved it because they can play a game in the classroom and it stops and goes. The ones in the center, if you're old enough like me to have seen the Tamagotchis in the past, that's the idea. So they mount this in a cardboard box. So they do an art project where they have a reactive pet. And this has been very, very successful. Microbits are cheap. That is an incredible imperative when you're trying to deal with rural schools. They're only about $20 a piece. And some of our schools, you guys are in Utah. We have a Utah and Alabama, which is built completely different. And about 8 students need to share a computer in at normal school. So it is great because for $20, the students can do a full project that they have programmed and they have an outcome. And they really learn a lot about algorithms, programming, and how to organize a task. So this has been very successful in giving students that interest in pursuing some more science. We're looking at whether it expands to interest in other areas like mathematics and the like. A second program that we're working on is the Builders Academy. This is funded by the NSF iTest program. And here we have partnered with 4 school districts in the rural area of the Black Belt. So we have Booker T. Washington High School from Tuskegee. It serves about 500 students. We have a very small, very rural school, Notasulga High School, that serves about 300 students in a single building pre-K-12 school. We have Central High School. This is a very industrial area in Phoenix City, Alabama. It's a large high school that serves about 1,300 students. And we have Lee High School in Montgomery, also a very large high school in an urban area that serves about 1,500 students. The numbers that you have in circles next to the name of the school is their science and math achievement. And as you can see, it is pretty low. Lee High School is one of the lowest achievement schools in the state and in the country. So for us, it was very important to go into these schools and try to see if we could do something that will change their students' perspective and achievement in science and math. These schools are relatively close to each other. Central and Lee are very distal. They're about 70 miles apart, but the students come together in the middle, which is Tuskegee, and they work on a project. These schools all have expressed a very high interest in improving their STEM education. Their teachers are super motivated, and we have been establishing relationships with the administration so they are willing to partner up with our program. So our students come together and we tell them that they need to identify a problem that affects their communities. And these are going to be things such as water quality, which is a huge problem in the Black Belt. How can you help people who are homeless? Most of our students have been homeless or will be homeless at some point. So it is something that is or know someone who's homeless. So it is something that is very important to them. Or how do you find contaminants in food? So they work in teams and they develop a possible solution to the problem. We don't need them to be invented and create something new. We just need them to use technology to actually work to recreate a possible solution to the problem. So they can develop a water filter, they can develop an air filter, they can develop a sensor that they can plug into their cell phone and detect metals in water. So for 3 weeks, they work in teams to do this. And this is something that really, really helps develop their 21st century skills, those soft skills that are so important for student development. Our students write us notes. They tell us that participating in this experience is life-changing. They never thought that they were going to meet someone that had the same interests as they did. A lot of them have gone into STEM careers at the community college or at the college level. A lot of them have received full ride scholarships. We're very proud to say that most of our peer mentors, the students that return year after year as volunteers to work in the program, have all been able to get into college with full ride scholarships. So that has been a great success. Those pictures are, student work. In this case, the students were tasked with creating a backpack that cools off a tent that had thermoreflective properties. So they had to work with material sciences. They have to understand a lot of physics. They have to do a lot of math to be able to build the tent so that it is self-supporting. They need to understand a lot about compression and expansion. They need to understand, reflection. So there's a lot of science concepts that they can learn this way. And yeah, it looks like arts and crafts, but they really have learned a lot about the things that are necessary for them to continue progressing in science in high school. Our last high school program is a legacy program. We call it the Black Girls in Alabama for Computing. And this is also funded by the iTest mechanism of the National Science Foundation. So Black women are the lowest representation group in computer science. Only about 1.5% to 2% of computer scientists are Black females. And one of the problems is it's very difficult to be a Black female in science. And a lot of times we think about Black females are, well, you know, they're women who happen to be Black, or they're Black people who happen to be women. But the reality is that the intersection of being a female and being Black creates a whole bunch of life history that is going to create some barriers for the development as part of the computer science task force. So what we've done in this program is we have created a peer community of Black females who wanted to take the AP CSP course, so the AP Computer Science Principle course. And we bring them into a residential experience that happens this summer before they take the exam. And it's almost like a boot camp for AP CSP. They get a lot of content knowledge, but they're working as a group. So they get a lot of social support. We bring a lot of role models for them. We do a lot of confidence building activities. And our goal was to develop interest, persistence, and success in computer science, which we can measure objectively by looking at their score in the AP CSP exam and by looking at their career awareness. This was not intended, but this program became a pilot for how to do this sort of intervention virtually, because in the middle of our first year, COVID hit and all of our in-person activities had to move to remote. So we were very concerned about the social support aspect of the program and how it was going to work. We were very happy that once we established the learning communities, they were self-supporting in the virtual environment. It was extremely important for us to provide students with a way to text each other. They don't want to email or message each other in any other way that is not texting. So we all had to become proficient in their language. So I don't have social media, but you know, we were doing Snapchat with the students because that's the only thing that they apparently know how to do. So we realized that we really needed to come down to their level. When it comes to outcomes, this has been one of our most successful programs to date. We had 38 participants, 32 of them took the exam, and 28 of them scored 3 or higher. Remember, you need to have a score of 3 to qualify. Their average was 325. We only had 2 students that received a score of 3. Most of them received a score that was higher than that. And when we compare them to all potential groups, our girls are the green bar there. We can compare them to all other groups in Alabama, which are the yellow bars, or all other groups nationally, which are the gray bars. Their passing rate of 90% exceeds every group that we want to compare them with. And this is just super exciting for us, the fact that we were able to get this success in our first year of implementation. Our conclusion from this program is that just curriculum was not enough to get these girls motivated. We've been trying to do this for years, and we have been very unsuccessful at getting these sorts of numbers. It was the fact that we brought them into a group of like-minded young women. They became extremely proud of the fact that they are Black females who are doing computer science. Our desire to pursue a career that involves computing is very, very high. About 80% of the students said that they would like to use computing and technology in their future careers. So you have a student who wants to be an artist, but now she wants to try AutoCAD, and she wants to try some design with computers. So we opened up a lot of fields for them that they didn't think about pursuing before. So now I'm going to move out of the K-12 level into the college level. And here we have 2 programs that are currently going on, the MAKERS program and the HBCU UP Material Sciences and Engineering program. I'm only going to talk to you about the MAKERS program, first of all, in the interest of time, and second, because the HBCU UP program is a professional development program. The component of education is not as large as for MAKERS. So our MAKERS program is funded by the NSF STEM program. And here we are trying to target low-income students. Sometimes when we think about minorities, we think about the color of people's skin or their ethnic background. We don't think about the fact that social background can also make you a minority. And when we think about low-income students, they are extremely underrepresented in all fields of higher education. Low-income students are less likely to choose to pursue STEM careers. They take significantly longer to graduate. A lot of times they don't really know what courses to take, or they transfer from community colleges and they don't transfer the right credits. So they come into college with a disadvantage, may take them 1 to 2 further years to graduate. They are a lot more likely to drop out or to take less credits than they need to be full-time. So it takes them longer to get to their goals. They are less likely to engage in extracurricular activities, especially what we know as high impact practices. So internships or clubs or study abroad. If you don't have money and you have to work, it's very impossible to do those things. they tend to feel very isolated. The experience that they have is not the same experience that other students have. And they tell us that college is a very unfair social structure. And all of these just feeds back to the fact that when we talk about the college experience, it costs money to have that college experience. Advisors complain that students don't read the books. If you have to choose between textbooks and gas, usually you choose gas. So it is very difficult for students from very low income backgrounds to keep up with the expenses of college. Even if it is to do a group project, they do it at the coffee shop and you may not be able to buy that cup of coffee. So it is very difficult for those students to keep up with the other students. So what do our makers do? Our makers, first of all, this is a scholarship program. They receive a scholarship of up to $10,000, not $10, $10,000 a year. $10 a year, I will get it out of my pocket. $10,000 a year. We task them with creating projects that apply their knowledge onto real life problems. So the picture here is a student, this was a group of biology, engineering, and chemistry students. And they didn't know what to do. They decided to create a trash can that is accessible by individuals with mobility problems. So they did all of the body mobility measurements, all the ergonomic measurements, and they figured out what direction of pulling the trash bag was the easiest for people to not have a strain in potentially reduced mobility limbs. So, we have another team of students that creating an e-bike, and it powers batteries, and they're powering a portion of their library right now with the batteries that they get from the bike. So they have a real life problem that they can work on to create a solution for, but that solution cannot be coming from a single discipline. It has to be interdisciplinary. Our students meet about once a week with their peers. So it creates a learning community. They study together, they kind of come together, they hang out together, they socialize together. We recognize them continuously for their achievements, and they have a lot of mentors, not only vertical from faculty to student, but also horizontal from peer to peer. This program has also been very successful. One of our community colleges has a baseline graduation rate in 2 years of 12%. We've moved it up to 50%, so it is a significant improvement in their graduation rates. So just to wrap up my presentation, because I think I'm running out of time, what have we learned from all of these projects? First of all, student engagement requires that we connect them to their reality, not our reality. And this is something that can be very difficult to understand, but pedagogy has to be culturally relevant. It is very difficult to explain to a kid why science is important if they cannot see it as part of their daily lives. So learning has to have a purpose. It has to be purposeful. And we achieve that purpose by creating a lot of project-based learning situations. So our students may comment, like, I don't really understand how to do this equation, but they're trying to use it for programming. Or students will tell us, oh, my favorite part of this is algorithms. And to hear an 8th grader to say that algorithms are their favorite part of school is really exciting, but it is their favorite part of school because they can use it to program a video game. So as long as we have that purpose in learning, it seems to be very important for students. And horizontal mentorship has been very, very important for us. So peers, mentoring peers, we include that in every single one of our programs, because a lot of times kids have a really hard time asking questions to those that they feel are superior or are older than them. We also need to understand who is the target of the intervention. We need to design for the students that we're trying to reach rather than the typical student. The typical student is the majority student, but if we're trying to reach minority students, we need to design for minority students. We also use a lot of evaluation, program evaluation coming from the students. So the students evaluate the program and we allow the educators to evaluate the outcomes rather than asking the educators to evaluate the program. So the students are the ones that tell us what works and what doesn't work. And I'll tell you what doesn't work in a second. We also teach a lot of agency to students. They need to be agents in their development. So part of what we do is encourage them to ask questions, seek help, and things of that sort. And then we also provide students with role models, but not only other people who are role models. We want them to think about themselves in the future and use themselves as a role model. And that is very, very important for students that are nearing graduation in high school. And finally, we need to understand diversity. We provide a very strict direction, but we give students a lot of flexibility. So each student can do things at their own pace and at the way that works for them. We also have understood now after many years that all career paths are equally important. Of course, our first goal is to push students into college, but if they want to go into a technical career, we encourage that. If they want to go and be apprentices for someone who does repairs of some sort, we encourage that because those careers are just as valuable to them. We create clusters of like students. We have students that are 70 miles apart and they have become best friends and they have been, rooming together now that they're in community college. So there's a lot of that can come of that community, and recognition for achievements is very important to students. Sometimes we have the best of intentions and things do not work. And, first thing that we learn is that more is not always better. Here's where student feedback has been very important. You make us go and attend to those workshops and we really don't like them and we don't get anything out of them. Well, maybe that workshop is not the best thing for us to be giving the students. If we pile a lot of interventions, students just get overwhelmed and they drop. So it is better to do one thing and do it well than to do many things and not get any outcome. Designing for students who do well leaves out the students who do not do well. Students who do well tend to do well regardless of what you give them. So we need to think about the other students. Fully self-paced instruction does not work for at-risk students. We need to start at their level and move on from there. Self-paced instruction sometimes fails from assuming that all students start at a particular level. And finally, students are fascinated by technology, but a lot of them do not have access to it. This is something that has become very relevant during COVID. A lot of our students do not have access to the internet. We had school buses going out with hotspots for students to be able to attend class. So when you think about that, videos and interactive online things are great, but a lot of times students cannot access them because they just don't have the technology to do that. And with that, I think I've exceeded my 25 minutes, and I need to thank the National Science Foundation for their funding and all of my collaborators. And if you want to learn more about these programs, you can go to my website. I have links to everything there. So with that, I'm going to go back to the dark screen.
I can't imagine. I actually have the chills just thinking about the amount of work and focus that has gone into creating these programs. One of the things that struck me the most from your presentation today was that first metaphor in terms of how we think about equity. I think we've all seen that caricature of having different levels of support for individuals with different perspectives or different levels of access, which has resonated with me a fair bit. But the last component is something that I haven't seen as much, which was this idea that we really must remove the metaphor or the barriers that get in the way of all students and not focus on propping students at different levels. And what's powerful about that is it takes the onus of responsibility to that next level. If we are able to put into practice a process of understanding where the leaks are in the pipeline, then we can hone in and focus on being able to patch those leaks. So I just, that alone, I think was immensely powerful, let alone all of the work that you've done. And so my first question for you is, how does one capture or become inspired to go down this path and then be able to stay focused in following the leaks so that you do get to a point where you're able to get students to transition either within a particular area of study, whether it be K-12 or in between the segments of the pipeline. So between K-12 to college. I think that's a fascinating thing, but how do you get inspired? What got you into this particular space, and how do you stay focused in doing this work?
So I'm not a first generation college student, but I'm a first generation out of poverty student. So, my family comes from a very impoverished background. My dad is one of way too many children. And my grandfather's idea was, if you go to college, you get out of being poor. So it was never a choice for us. We had to study, go to college, and we needed to get out of being poor. So that for me was always very powerful. But then, you can get from my accent, I didn't grow up in the US, and then I came back to the US, and the first thing that people did was label me as a minority, which I didn't understand. And I was born in the US, but my job took us overseas, and minority for me meant, in my rudimentary translation, I'm a minor. And I was just kept on telling people, no, I'm not minority. And people kept on telling me, yes, you are. It was very difficult for me to understand why that was important. But then as you know, I went through graduate school. In graduate school, you don't pay attention to anything because you're so busy, you don't care. But when I got to be a college professor for the first time, and you start counting the number of students that you have and the number of students that you see progressing, and you see them dropping out, and you see that it's always the same type of student that drops out, and you see that it's always the same type of student that is failing. That's why I became interested in how to train teachers to be actually good at reaching out to those students that have the need. And I connected with Tuskegee. I was in Alabama at the time, and I connected with Tuskegee University. They wanted to do a teacher development program, and they called me and see if I could help them implement that. And that's when I started to look at the statistics carefully. All of a sudden, minority resonated, and I understood what that meant, and I understood the history behind that. And I was appalled by the number of students that we lost. Even within a graduate program, we were a very large graduate program. We had about 140 students. We typically lost 20 every year. And they were always our students of color, always our female students. So what is it that we're doing wrong? That even when they have been such high achievers and have made it to graduate school, we still lose them. Then I started looking at faculty, and the ones that didn't get tenure were the ones, usually the females and the faculty of color. What are we doing wrong that after you manage to get through the punishment of graduate school and you get a PhD, you still decide to drop out? And that's when we started working backwards to, okay, so we're working with graduate students, but the problem begins earlier. Right now we are sitting actually this morning we had a meeting talking about, we want to start a program at the, K-5 level, where we actually, when kids are still interested in science, bugs are cool and lizards are great. And, you have a balloon and that is the best thing in the world. How can we maintain that excitement and that amazement? And how can we transfer that to middle school? Because by the time we get to our 8th graders, a lot of them already tell us that they hate math. So that is part of the reason why, is to actually see the problem that we have. Is actually, if you have never had the experience of traveling the Black Belt in Alabama and Mississippi, is something that everybody should do to get an awareness of how people live in a large portion of our country. And if we can help them get out of poverty, if we can close that income gap, it will be an amazing thing for us as a society. So those are the things that keep you motivated. And of course, the students themselves, when they 5 years later to send you an email, hey, I just wanted to let you know I got my job at Google. And you're like, who was this kid? Oh my God, he was the one that I kept on telling, pull your pants up, man, you're not looking professional. So those are the things that keep you going. So it is a lot of work, but it is very, very rewarding. I don't know if I answered your question fully.
Beautifully, thank you.
Kind of bridging off of that, you have all these incredible programs across so many different levels of education. And, I know from speaking with you before about your work, there's so many incredible student stories that, really keep you motivated. Is there any particular story that really stands out that you love to think about that keeps you highly motivated to keep this going?
Oh my God, there's so many, but there's this one kid. So I want to tell you about 2 students with very different life stories. There's one, he came to camp. We have this summer program. He came to camp late every day. And we didn't understand why. So finally, I'm just getting my teacher mode, and I'm like, you can't be coming late. And he's like, well, I work in a nursing home and I have the night shift. So this is a high schooler. He's a senior in high school. So, I get out at 8 and it is an hour and a half away. So I need to get the bus and I need to get my aunt to drive me here. And, it takes me a little while longer. So now we started to figure out what's going on with this kid. So he's working at the nursing home. He works at the gas station after school. He's also the star player of their basketball team. So he was coming out of camp, and in the bus that was driving him back to school, he was changing clothes to jump out of the bus and run to practice. After practice, he's running to the gas station, and from the gas station, he's going to the nursing home. And all that you're thinking is, when is the student sleeping or eating or doing anything? And he came to talk to me one day, and he's like, my dad is pushing me to go into basketball, but all I want to do is biology. I want to be a microbiologist. And, I'm like, well, man, we're going to have to get you into college. And he actually ended up getting a full ride scholarship for microbiology at Alabama State University. And he's in his 3rd year right now, doing great. He's got a 4.0 GPA, and he's thinking about graduate school. And we're working with him on his graduate school applications. So that's the type of story, for him. not being in sports, that's the only thing you can do if you want to get out of being poor. So just to be able to see another outlet was great. We have another student, the first day of camp, he went and sat on his own at lunch. We don't allow them to sit by themselves because we're supposed to be creating community. And he said that if we were going to force him to eat with someone else, he was going to drop out of camp. And as we're talking to him, this other kid, you know, the cool kid was walking by and goes like, man, you're reading about Arduino boards? And, you know, this is like, yes, I am. Why? So both of them sat together. They asked us for an Arduino board. We gave it to them. And at lunch, they started working on this. And by the end of the 3 weeks of camp, we had about 7 or 8 students that were sitting together programming this board. They didn't make it anywhere. But the thing is, they live 70 miles away and they were able to connect. They both graduated 2.5 years, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Yes, 2.5 years now. They graduated high school and they started a small company where they do software for, you know, small businesses. So, you know, those types of stories, then he doesn't want to be doing this forever. He wants to get further education. So he is studying to become a welder and he wants to be an underwater welder, which if you didn't know, pays ridiculously well because it's a high risk profession. But it is a technical career that he has developed an interest on, thanks to participating in a program where he understood technology. So those are the type of stories that we really have that makes us very happy.
Those are wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing those.
So, you'll probably, if you glance at the chat, see there are tons of questions mixed in with a lot of, I think, awe as we all are right now. I'm going to try to see if I can capture some of those questions in random order. I apologize if I don't do this in an organized way. But we have a question from Andres Abeta saying, Martha, your program efforts are amazingly connected end to end. Ton of work to get there. Question. I found due to lack of minority mentors in STEM, it's excruciatingly hard to get their time. How are you doing this? My goal is to have a multicultural set of teachers, advisors, and mentors. I have to work extra hard to extract these people from the tiny pool.
So do reach out to them. One of the ways in which we get people to mentor is, now that we know we can do everything by Zoom, you know, asking people for 10 to 15 minutes of their time is something that they're usually very willing to give. But we don't limit our pool of mentors and role models only to established professionals. We have an incredible number of graduate students, college students who can serve as mentors. They have very powerful stories of how they have overcome adversity. We have a lot of organizations that will bring together individuals and they can provide you know, like video recordings, video statements. There's a lot of organizations, for example, for Girls in Science, Girls Code, and things of that sort that have a lot of role model videos that can be used. But just bug people, invite them. They are usually very willing to provide their time. If you're trying to get mentors and you can't find them, shoot me an email. I can probably give you the names of a few people who are very willing to give their time. Reaching out to people that have funded programs is a great thing because that is something that we're required to do by the sponsor. Most people will do it happily, but we're also required to do it by the sponsor. There are great national organizations like Youth Radio that will connect you with mentors. And you know, it is difficult to get the time. A lot of times, you know, people email you and you put the email off for 10 minutes and then it's in the bottom of your pile and it's really hard to get back to it. So the phone is a great alternative. It's very difficult for people to say no when you call them on the phone. And I know that we don't do phone anymore, but do phone. And people are, if they answer the phone, they're going to be very willing to talk to you. It's very hard for them to say no. But overall, if you make a request, you're going to get a lot of negatives, but you're going to get a lot of positives too. And young people at the beginning of their careers are more willing to provide their time for these sorts of things. And once you have them as your mentors, they stay with you forever and they grow your network. So the important thing is to get those first few individuals that are going to allow you to create a network that grows, because you know that is the first and most difficult step. You know, if you're a new program, it's kind of hard, but if you connect with a larger organization or a larger program, they usually can get you very well positioned to reach more people and get more of those mentorship relationships established. But yeah, I have a whole bunch of victims for you if you want to send me an email. I know some people that will not say no. Yeah.
We'll share your lab website also in the chat so that individuals can see what you're doing there and then contact you through there as well. So another question, you have mentioned a lot during the presentation how important that peer community is for the students. So Soham has asked what technology platforms have worked well to create those peer communities. And if you're not using any technology platforms, how do students stay connected with each other, after the programs or in between when they meet in person?
So our greatest challenge was this past year with our legacy program, because we brought the students in the summer to a residential program. They met, they began forming relationships, and about 4 months later, everything shut down and everybody went their own ways. We had a whole bunch of activities planned where they were meeting face to face and it didn't work. So we had already created a texting group through GroupMe, which was just to tell them where they were supposed to go when they were in the program. But we allowed the students to take it over, and we started tracking the text, and we were clocking, there were 38 girls, so we were clocking about 850 texts a day that they were exchanging rapidly. We do create social media sites for them to interact. We tried like a blog, and kids these days, they don't understand blogs. It is static, is not good. They want places where they can share pictures and they can communicate quickly, either to a group or individually with each other. But the very important thing was to create activities where they could join, and those activities were not, they were educational, but they were not centered around education. So, I don't have my glasses. We have Hawaiian lace and fun glasses that we had for a meeting that we had, and everybody had to wear their glasses, and the most outrageous custom won a prize. We send them little care packages so that like popcorn and candy, and so that way everybody has their same thing. We got together to watch a movie at one point. So we organized some activities to keep the students engaged, but giving them the opportunity to use texting platforms, all of them were instantly friends in Instagram and Snapchat. It just didn't take a day. And when we told them they could tag the program on everything, then they were super excited taking pictures and sharing the pictures. And we do a lot of recognition of our students, and we do that through social media as well. One of our PIs is the master of Twitter, and he puts everything like instantly. So we have a beautiful record of what the students are doing, so they can refer to that record as well. But for us, this time around, we are exploring other different platforms. But really what we are going to have to do is, based on the age of the students, ask them, give them a choice and ask them which one they are more willing to use. Because like we started with Facebook, and right now, not even I have a Facebook page, and none of our students do. Twitter is for old people now. So we were trying to use Snapchat, which is not necessarily what we old people do. So we just let the students use their own platform. We are going to start doing some virtual programs this summer because of COVID, and we have not finalized our platform selection. We were going to use Teams for students to work, but we really need to take into account their access to the internet and how that is going to work. And our students still to this day, texting has been the easiest way to contact them. We contact them frequently, shortly. They don't want to get long messages from us. They just want to get the brief reminder of what's going on. So that's been what has worked best. We are trying to catch up with the times right now, and our students are guiding the effort. So we're just really letting them lead in that respect.
Yeah, and I can't overestimate or overstate how important that seemingly subtle approach is, which is that you're not assuming that students will basically adapt to your structure or to our structures. You're meeting students where they are. We're recognizing where the barriers structurally are, and then trying to get better access to students no matter where they are. And again, the amount of work and thought and care that has to go into that approach alone, I can't even begin to fathom. I think I'm pretty sure I can speak for almost everyone here on this conversation. I've seen it in the chat. I can't share enough gratitude, both for you taking the time to be here, but also for the incredible work that you've demonstrated. because it's an inspiration to all of what we're doing too. Seeing an example of how exactly you can take what begins as a personal experience and then look for areas of potential remedy and impact and invest wholly into that, I think really is why we're all in this space. So first of all, thank you for being here. Thank you for your time and all the incredible work that you do. I do want to encourage people to stay connected with us and engage us. I'm not sure if I can volunteer your contact information for people to reach out, but certainly feel free to reach out to our team, which you can get access to by catching us on one of our Twitter or social media channels at WG Labs. Basically, anywhere you go, we're there. Feel free to reach out to us. If you think these Learning Lab speaker series are informative, useful, we want to know. We want to hear from you. We personally derive a fair bit of gratitude and enjoyment and fulfillment in being able to come together from different perspectives and tear down the walls that potentially keeps ideas from being able to be shared. And as you've seen here today, we have a pioneer in the space of education with an incredible track record of work of great impact, who's been more than kind and generous to be able to share with us her ideas and her work that she's doing. I, for one, will volunteer if you're looking for a mentor. I think you've inspired me to put some of my time. I think the work that you're doing goes without question, is incredibly meaningful. So sign me up. Feel free to call anytime. But with that, I want to be mindful of everyone's time. I appreciate you all being here. Again, reach out if you're interested in getting a recording of today's session, which we'll be sharing, or want to learn more about some of the upcoming sessions we have. We're really excited and thrilled in terms of the lineup that we have planned. We have Vincent Tinto, who's going to be presenting with us on April 28th. We have Jane Elliott, who's also agreed to have a conversation with us. Jane Elliott is the American school teacher who pioneered the blue eyes, green eyes experiments. We have Jeffrey Cohen from Stanford University, and we're going to continue to building out this speaker series, hoping that we can reconvene and share ideas across boundaries. So for all of you for being here, for your incredible questions, thank you all. If there's any last words for Martha, please feel free to share. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to our team at WG Labs.
Thanks, Martha. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you all for sharing your time with me, and feel free to reach out. I'd be very happy to talk to anyone that may have further questions. I know we weren't able to get through everything.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Be well, everyone. Thank you.